Here is a horror story of a mother and son traveling by RV from Sydney to Melbourne at night, encountering eerie human-like creatures on the highway under moonlight. The night was thick with silence as the old RV rumbled onto the Hume Highway, its headlights cutting through the darkness like twin knives. Inside, Claire gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white, while her son, Jamie, sat quietly beside her, eyes wide and alert. They had left Sydney hours ago, chasing the promise of a fresh start in Melbourne, but the long stretch of road ahead seemed endless and foreboding. The moon hung low and full, casting a pale silver glow over the empty highway. The only sounds were the steady hum of the engine and the occasional rustle of wind brushing against the RV's sides. Claire glanced at Jamie, who was staring out the window, his breath fogging the glass. "Are you tired, love?" she asked softly. Jamie shook his head. "No, Mum, it's just... this place feels weird." Claire forced a smile. "It's just the night. The highway can feel lonely sometimes." But even as she spoke, a shiver ran down her spine. The road stretched ahead, straight and unyielding, but shadows seemed to flicker at the edges of her vision. She blinked, and they were gone. About an hour later, the RV's headlights caught something on the side of the road, a figure hunched and still. Claire slowed down, squinting to make out the shape. "Did you see that?" Jamie whispered. Claire nodded, heart pounding. "Probably just someone hitchhiking. Should we stop?" Jamie's eyes were wide with fear. "No, Mum, please don't." But before Claire could respond, the figure stepped onto the road. It was a man, or at least it looked like one, but his movements were jerky, unnatural. His skin was pale, almost translucent under the moonlight, and his eyes glowed faintly with an eerie yellow hue. Claire slammed on the brakes, the RV screeching to a halt. The man didn't flinch, just stared at them with a hollow gaze. What are you?" Claire asked, voice trembling. The figure tilted his head, a grotesque smile spreading across his face, revealing sharp, uneven teeth. Then, without warning, he lunged toward the RV. Claire slammed the gear into reverse and floored the accelerator. The RV lurched backward, tires screeching on the asphalt. Jamie screamed as the figure's hands scraped against the side of the vehicle, leaving deep, bloody gouges. "Hold on!" Claire shouted, turning the wheel sharply to get back onto the highway. As they sped away, more figures appeared along the roadside, human-like creatures with pale skin, glowing eyes, and twisted limbs. They moved with unnatural speed, darting between the trees and bushes, blocking the road ahead. Claire's heart hammered in her chest. The highway, once a symbol of freedom and escape, had become a nightmare corridor lined with monsters. She tried to call for help, but the phone had no signal. The radio crackled with static, then a voice whispered through the noise. "You can't escape. The night belongs to us." Jamie clung to his mother, tears streaming down his face. "Mum, what are they?" Claire swallowed hard. "I don't know, but we have to keep moving." The RV's headlights caught a break in the creature's blockade, a narrow gap between two trees. Claire steered toward it, the vehicle scraping against branches and rocks. The creatures howled in frustration but didn't pursue. Breathing heavily, Claire glanced at Jamie. "We're going to be okay, I promise." But as the moonlight faded behind thick clouds, the shadows seemed to grow longer, and the night whispered of horrors yet to come. This story builds atmosphere and suspense by gradually revealing the terrifying creatures on the highway, blending the familiar setting of the Sydney-Melbourne route with supernatural horror under the moonlight. The mother and son's vulnerability and emotional connection heighten the tension, while the unknown nature of the creatures taps into primal fears. This second true horror story is of a mother and son living in height-rise apartment building. The old apartment building on Elm Street had been empty for years. Its faded brick facade was cracked and stained, windows boarded up or shattered, and the once bright sign above the entrance hung crooked, its letters peeling away like dead skin. No one wanted to live there anymore. Rumors swirled about strange noises, disappearances, and a darkness that seemed to seep from the walls themselves. But for Sarah and her 10-year-old son, Jamie, it was the only place they could afford. After the fire that destroyed their previous home, they had nowhere else to go. The landlord had offered them the entire building for a suspiciously low rent, warning them that no other tenants remained. Sarah didn't care. She just wanted a fresh start. The day they moved in, the sun was setting behind a thick layer of gray clouds. The air was heavy and still. As they pushed open the creaking front door, a cold draft swept through the empty lobby, carrying with it the faint scent of mildew and something else, something metallic and old. Jamie clutched his mother's hand tightly. "Mom, it's so quiet here." Sarah forced a smile. "It's just because no one else lives here. We'll make it our home." They climbed the narrow staircase to their apartment on the 3rd floor. The hallway was dimly lit by a single flickering bulb, casting long shadows that danced on the peeling wallpaper. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional drip of water somewhere deep in the building. Inside their apartment, the air was stale but dry. The windows were grimy, filtering the outside world into a dull gray haze. Sarah unpacked their few belongings while Jamie explored the empty rooms, his footsteps echoing off the bare walls. That night, as Sarah lay in bed, she heard it. A faint scratching sound coming from the walls. She told herself it was just the building settling, or maybe a rat. But the sound persisted, growing louder and more insistent until it seemed to be right behind the bedroom wall. Jamie, curled up beside her, whispered, "Mom, do you hear that?" Sarah nodded, trying to sound brave. "It's nothing, sweetheart, just the building." But deep down, she wasn't so sure. Days passed, and the strange noises continued. Scratches, whispers, footsteps in the empty hallways. Sarah tried to ignore them, focusing on finding a job and making the apartment livable. Jamie, however, grew more withdrawn, his eyes darting nervously whenever the shadows shifted. One afternoon, Jamie came running into the kitchen, pale and trembling. "Mom, I saw someone in the hallway." Sarah frowned. "There's no one else here, Jamie. You're imagining things." "No, I'm not. I saw a man. He was standing by the stairs, but when I looked again, he was gone." Sarah's heart pounded. She decided to check the building thoroughly. She walked the empty corridors, calling out, but no one answered. The silence was suffocating. That night, Sarah locked the doors and windows, but the scratching returned, louder and more frantic. Jamie refused to sleep alone, so Sarah let him share her bed. As they lay there, the whispers began, soft, unintelligible voices that seemed to come from inside the walls. Sarah reached out and held Jamie's hand tightly. "We're safe. Nothing can hurt us." But the voices grew louder, more urgent, until they sounded like a chorus of desperate pleas. Determined to find the source of the noises, Sarah searched the apartment for any hidden spaces. Behind a loose panel in the living room wall, she found a narrow crawl space filled with old newspapers and broken furniture. Among the debris was a small, rusted box. Inside the box were photographs, black and white images of families who once lived in the building. But as Sarah flipped through them, she noticed something disturbing. In every photo, a shadowy figure lurked in the background, its face obscured, but its eyes glowing faintly. A chill ran down her spine. She showed the photos to Jamie, who gasped. "That's the man I saw. He's been here all along." Sarah realized the building was not just abandoned, it was haunted by something malevolent, something that had trapped the previous tenants. That night, the apartment was plunged into darkness as the power went out. The only light came from the moon filtering through the grimy windows. The scratching turned into pounding, the whispers into screams.
Sarah and Jamie huddled together as the walls seemed to close in around them. Shadows moved independently of any light source, twisting and writhing like living things. Suddenly, the door to their bedroom slammed shut. Sarah tried to open it, but it was as if an invisible force held it fast. "Mom, I'm scared," Jamie sobbed. "We have to stay calm," Sarah whispered, though her own fear was overwhelming. From the darkness, a figure emerged, a tall, gaunt man with whole.
The grocery store was nearly empty when Clara and her son, Jamie, finished their shopping. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Clara pushed the cart down the last aisle, her mind already on the walk home. It was late, well past 9, and the night outside was unusually still. Jamie, clutching a small bag of candy, was eager to get home and watch his favorite cartoon before bed. "Ready to go, Jamie?" Clara asked, glancing at her watch. "Yeah, Mom, let's hurry," he said, bouncing on the balls of his feet. They paid quickly, the cashier's tired smile barely masking her own unease. Outside, the night air was cool and crisp, the kind that made Clara pull her jacket tighter around her. The streetlights flickered faintly, casting long shadows on the cracked pavement. As they started down the sidewalk, Clara noticed something odd. The sky, which had been a deep, velvety black when they left the store, was shifting. A strange, unnatural hue was spreading across the horizon, an eerie, sickly green that pulsed faintly like a living thing. "Jamie, look up," Clara said, stopping in her tracks. Jamie tilted his head back, his wide eyes reflecting the strange glow above. The stars, usually bright and steady, were dimming, swallowed by the creeping color. The moon, a silver crescent just moments ago, was vanishing, melting away like wax under a flame. "Mom, what's happening?" Jamie whispered, clutching her hand tightly. Clara's heart pounded. She tried to rationalize it, some atmospheric phenomenon, maybe a storm coming, but the air was still, unnervingly so. The green light thickened, spreading like ink across the sky, blotting out the stars and swallowing the moon whole. Suddenly, the streetlights flickered violently, then went out, plunging them into darkness. The only light came from the unnatural glow above, casting twisted shadows on the empty street. "Stay close," Clara said, pulling Jamie closer. Her voice trembled despite her effort to stay calm. They began walking faster, the silence around them growing oppressive. The usual night sounds, crickets, distant cars, the rustle of leaves, were gone. It was as if the world had been muted, waiting for something. Then came the whispers. At first, Clara thought it was the wind, but the sound was too deliberate, too close. Soft voices, murmuring in a language she couldn't understand, seemed to seep from the very air around them. Jamie whimpered, "Mom, I'm scared." "Me too," Clara admitted, though she tried to sound brave. "We're almost home." But the path they knew so well was changing. The houses on either side of the street seemed to stretch and warp, their windows dark and empty like hollow eyes. The trees bent unnaturally, their branches twisting into grotesque shapes that reached out like claws. The green sky pulsed faster now, throbbing with a terrible life. Clara's skin prickled with cold sweat. She felt eyes on her, something unseen, watching, waiting. Suddenly, a figure appeared ahead, blocking the road. It was tall and thin, draped in shadows, its face obscured by a hood. It didn't move, but Clara felt its gaze pierce her soul. "Who's there?" she called, voice shaking. No answer. The figure raised a hand, and the whispers grew louder, swirling around them like a storm. Jamie screamed, tugging at Clara's sleeve. "Mom, run!" Clara grabbed his hand and they bolted down the street, the green sky swirling above them like a vortex. The figure didn't follow, but the whispers chased them, filling their ears with promises of darkness and despair. They reached their front door, fumbling with the keys as the last of the green light faded,
and the moon reappeared, pale and distant. The normal night sounds returned, the chirping of crickets, the rustle of leaves. But Clara knew something had changed. Inside, she locked the door and held Jamie close. Outside, the sky was calm again, but the memory of the vanishing moon and the creeping green light haunted her. That night, as Jamie slept fitfully, Clara stared out the window, wondering what they had seen and what had seen them.